Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to wait 5 minutes for more people to join us before we get started, but just wanted to say thank you so much for being here with us today, being part of this conversation with us.
Kathy, you got my message.
I did. I'm glad I can join, and please don't mind me. I'll actually be eating my lunch.
No, well, that's the hope. We're happy that everybody's here and that feel free to eat, drink, take a break, whatever you need. This is your time.
Thank you, Jill, for the invitation.
Yeah. I am going to. All right, well, bear with me. I think I will start sharing my screen just to make sure we're all set, if that's okay. Maybe. Is it good? Okay.
So that may be, just want to make sure that may be the end of the slideshow. The first slide should be a black screen with the.
Oh,
Sweet, thank you.
everybody just got a sneak peek. If anyone has any questions that they want addressed or talked about within this conversation, feel free to put them in the chat to everyone or to me directly. Something that you may be coming in with some wonderings about. All right, so it's about 5 after. I will be doing the intro, but then be monitoring the chat. So if anyone has any questions, any comments, anything that you need, please add it to the chat and connect with us directly. We're happy to respond. But Leandra and Lawrence will be doing most of the talking, so it will be easier if you do want to do a direct message that you message me. So I just want to welcome all of you here to a Lunch and Learn. I think this is actually Lawrence, Leandra, and our first official lunch and learn as a team. So it would be nice maybe to take a second to introduce ourselves. My name is Jill Van. I am a white woman, late 40s, brown hair, wearing a pink top because I wanted to be a little more vibrant today as I joined all of you. And I am the co-founder, co-director of DisArt, and it's an organization that we exist to cultivate and celebrate disability culture. We're doing our best. We're learning like all of you. And we are so excited that you're here to come alongside us as we think about and talk about belonging, care, and dignity within the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. I'm going to pass it to Lawrence and then Leandra, maybe for some self-descriptions and introductions, and then we'll take it from there.
Hello, good day, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's morning here in Oakland, California. My name is Lawrence Carter Long. I'm a middle-aged white man with cerebral palsy wearing a floral shirt and a yellow t-shirt underneath it. And I'm on the back deck of my place here in Oakland. So pleasure to be with you, and I'm excited to be doing this today.
Can I pause real quick and talk to Laura? I see that you want me to spotlight you. When I spotlight you, it means that I have to unpin, everybody else becomes unpinned. Is that the preference?
Whatever works best, but right now Zoom is only spotlighting whoever is speaking. So if I'm not speaking while I'm interpreting, I'm not showing up on the main
you're
screen.
okay. My apologies. You're pinned on mine. Is that's the case for everybody?
Typically, pinning will only bring it to the front on your screen, not for anyone else. Spotlighting will do it for everyone in the audience. Pinning will just do it for your personal computer.
Okay. Aren't you glad I said we're always learning and growing? I just set that one up perfectly. So let's try spotlighting and see. Now you need to be the host, yes?
Shouldn't need to be. No, you should.
It's-
Whoever is the host should be able to spotlight.
Can someone tell me if Laura is spotlighted for them?
Nancy is saying no, I can't. I can't see the interpreter. I can't see Laura right now.
Add spotlight.
There we go.
All right. And I'm double pinned because I'm the host. I get it. Okay. So people are seeing me always and Laura. Is that correct?
Yes.
You know, we've only lived in this world of Zoom for how many years? That's okay.
Oh, 1 second.
Yep.
I'm
Wait.
trying to see Nancy.
I think I need to make.
This is Nancy speaking right now. I see a whole bunch of people and I see the slides. I'm
going to make you are spotlighted, but I am going to make you a co-host as well to see if that makes a difference. Does that help?
just trying to clarify with Nancy how's the best way for her to be able to see me.
For sure.
Delay.
Is Nancy able to pin you on her end?
Okay. Nancy's saying I can see the slides, I can see the interpreter, but she's just really small on my screen. But Nancy said, go ahead, it's fine. We'll just leave it.
I wonder. I can, when I'm, sorry, you're talking. I can switch at the top of my, like the type of video option I use to like active speaker video, and you're pinned. I don't know if this is the case for other people, and I can make you larger.
Okay, Nancy was able to switch the view, and she said, now I can see the slide and I can see the presenter and the interpreter. They're large
Okay.
on my screen, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for navigating this with us, helping us figure this out, and working with us. Isn't that what Access is all about? So I love to have it playing out in real time. So the slide you're seeing on the screen is actually the logo for Art of Disruption, the Art of Disruption. It's white text on a black background that reads the Art of Disruption, with the art of on the top line and disruption on the bottom. The center line of both center letters of both lines, you start seeing our art. You see DisArt playing through here. The letters are of different font type. They're kind of blurred very intentionally. So if you're wondering about our reasoning behind the design of this logo, tune in next Wednesday when the John O'Neill of Conduit Studio will be joining us to have a discussion around this logo and access in design particularly. So we're really excited for that, that conversation. All right. We want to thank our sponsors. There's been a few sponsors. This project has been in development for, I say, over 3 years. So we have some long-term sponsors that have been with us from the beginning, including the Ford Foundation. Back in 2020, the Grand Rapids Community Foundation started supporting us back in 2021. The Steelcase Incorporate corporate company, they started supporting us back in 2022 and again this year for this exhibition preview that we're having during Art Prize in Grand Rapids. And then most recently, we received a grant to support artist commissions from the National Endowment for the Arts moving forward for the exhibition, the larger exhibition that we're planning to open in New York next fall and throughout 2025. In addition, locally, Art Prize is a major sponsor of the preview that we're having in Grand Rapids currently. Conduit Studio, as I mentioned, the creator of the design for the Art of Disruption, has been very supportive and donating a lot of time and energy to this project. Dégagé Ministries is a partner, a local partner that we're going to be having an internal artist workshop with Josiah Golson this coming Friday, which we're really excited about. Fast Signs has been a long-term partner of ours, and they have, if you're able to visit the site in person, you'll notice there's a ramp and there's vinyl signs on there, but then all the other prints as well that are in vinyl were created by Fast Signs. Sidecar Studios is a local production company that does videography for us, and we will be having multiple reels of the project in Grand Rapids coming out, and then following the project, a bit more of a teaser for what's to come in New York. And Site Lab has been a strong partner of ours for DisArt for many years, since 2016. We've worked with them over the years, and this year during Art Prize, the preview, the structure that the art itself is connected to, and that forms the centerpiece of the exhibition, has been brought to you and all of us by Site Lab, and they also hosted our opening night in Hartside Park. And then lastly, we are working with a a Spanish major at the University of Michigan in the Spanish language internship program, and they are helping to slowly add some Spanish language translation for the materials that we're offering on our website. So a huge shout out to everybody, and then all the individuals along the way who have supported us. And we will be asking, just so you're aware, give you alert at the end of this hour, if you feel like there's been some information gained that's been valuable and you have the means, we would appreciate any donations that to help continue to support DisArt and the Art of Disruption project specifically. So thank you for being here, and I will pass it on to my colleagues. I'm gonna try. Did that unspotlight? Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jill. I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. My name is Leandra Lesueur. I'm the creative director at DisArt. I have been working and dreaming about this project since 2020. And really excited to see it in Grand Rapids for Art Prize this year. As a preview of sorts, we've been working with 28 artists over the course of the past 3 years, and showcasing 10 artists as part of this preview. Just to give a visual description of myself, I am a Black woman with shoulder length locks that are freeform. I'm wearing a white t-shirt, and I will have sun coming in and out of my view. So you may see a glowing light on my face, and there's a blue, yellow, and red, and also some green painting that is to my right-hand side. This first image you see.
Can I do something? It's hard for me to, I'm hearing one, my apologies, Leandra, for not taking the time to introduce you. My brain is trying to go through all these things. I'm going to make you the host, and I'm going to see if that allows you to be pinned. Does that help? It's the spotlight that's, and when I'm controlling this slide, it makes it difficult. Does anyone?
I just spotlighted myself, so I think folks should be able to see me, and
Perfect.
I'm spotlighting Lawrence as well.
Yay, thank you for helping with tech.
So just wanted to get into this conversation. Lawrence and I, we have 6 questions that we wanted to kind of discuss and bring up. I'll let Lawrence lead this one before I hand it over to him. We hope that this can be like an open dialogue. Obviously, like lunch and learns, sometimes people don't know what they're coming in for. You may think that you're just coming to like hear someone talk, and that's very well true. We have a lot of thoughts and ideas, but we also, excuse me, are really open to kind of this communal space where this communal learning happens, as a way for us all to kind of better understand and kind of unravel our own kind of perceptions, and be open to another person's like thoughts and ideas. So really excited to be in this space with you all. And again, thank you for being here. So I'll hand it over to Lawrence.
So we're starting out with the question, why and how is DEI a valuable starting point, but not the final destination? The slides you see on the screen are to the left. There's a historical black and white photo of a disability rights protest. The crowd is marching straight toward the viewer, and it's led by 3 wheelchair users, including a person with a service dog. The wheelchair user on the left holds up a sign that reads, "We shall overcome." The wheelchair user to the right has a sign that says, "Access is a civil right," that's draped across their legs. The crowd behind them is vast and diverse. On the right side of the screen, you see a historical black and white photo of a civil rights protest. There's a group of Black men in 60s era clothing in a line in the front. They've got signs pinned to their shirts or in their hands that read, "I am a man," and with "am" underlined, or "Union Justice Now." There's a crowd behind them that's holding different signs with different slogans. So when thinking about this, it seems to me, my work has been primarily communications, a lot of it in media. And That's you're getting ideas across, you're sharing concepts, you're sharing ideas, you're hopefully connecting, right? The root of community and communication is the same. It means we do it together. And so while diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think, is a wonderful foundation in terms of rethinking where we are in the world, where our organization might be in the world, where we are individually in the world, how we're included or not included in conversations or initiatives or opportunities for people who are artists or advocates. It's a starting point. It's the beginning of that process, to my mind, because don't think that the realization is enough. The realization is great. Whoa, we need to be thinking about more. We need to be including more. We need to go deeper. We need to go broader. Whatever those realizations are about who's been at the table and who's not been at the table, who we're inviting in and who we're not inviting in. That's really important, but it can only go so far. I think in the world that we live in today, we're at an interesting intersection where a lot of people talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Putting it into practice, however, takes effort. It requires more, and it can only be so successful. It can only do so much if you're making an invitation, but somebody doesn't feel like they belong. And so what I would like to get to, and part of what our approach, we don't have all the answers here. These are concepts and ideas and practices that we're thinking about, that we're trying to put into place, that we're adopting, experimenting with, learning from. So I think a DEI strategy in terms of, let's say, a nonprofit organization or a workplace, it's a good starting point, but what it can't do is create an environment and culture of acceptance and value. Ultimately, where folks are enthusiastic about being there and eager to participate. To my mind, that's why broadening that to include BCD, belonging, care, and dignity, is just so crucial, because it focuses not on ticking the box of what you're required to do. It's somewhat similar to the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's a law and it's on the books and you should follow it. But emotionally, how does the disabled person who does not have access feel about having to call the box office and make sure that there's proper seating, or that there's sign language interpretation, or that there's audio description? What is that process like for them? What are those extra steps for them? And how do they influence someone's experience and feeling of belonging, right? There's something about feeling safe and secure. And here's, I think, the most important word: welcome. Like, you're not a burden, right? And where we're at these days, I think, with DEI work is, yeah, we do it sort of grudgingly as a culture, but that sense of belonging, of warmth, of acceptance and support, and I also think of validation, right, in action. Yes, we hear you. Yes, we see you. Yes, we welcome you, is often lost. I think the sense of belonging is so important, because when applied correctly, belonging equals community. Belonging means you're not alone. Belonging means that other people have their back and they're in this with you. And I think that is very often what seems to be lacking in a lot of DEI work. it's belonging to my mind, and belonging, care, and dignity especially, isn't content with ticking a box. It requires more of people, and says that we dig deeper. And I think most importantly, it embraces that process that you talk about, Leandra, of
Yeah.
continuous becoming. That you're
Yeah.
never completely 100% done, that you can always do a little better, as we just learned with pinning the sign language interpreters and thinking about that right in real time. I'm curious to know if there's anything you might add to that.
Yeah, actually, it feels like it flows like actually kind of seamlessly into this next question we ask, because I think the idea that you brought up, continuous becoming, which is one of the themes that we have as part of this work, is something that is really important to consider within this work. I think a lot of times when you think about DEI, it's like, okay, we're doing, DEI exists and we're doing this work because we have to have all of the answers. We have to have everything right. Everything has to be correct. And to be honest, that's like an extreme overwhelm. And I think to try to avoid that, or maybe not avoid that, but to make the process a little bit smoother, this idea of continuous becoming becomes something that is really important and valuable in understanding, like, what does it mean to actually start in a place that is not necessarily like the best place to start? What does it also mean to fail? And when you are actually moving through that failure, how are you actively learning and changing and adjusting and adapting? If we could go to the next slide, Jill. So this question that we have is, what does failure look like in this work? And I think it's a really important question. Before I even get into it, the image that you see is actually a photograph from one of our artists' works, Julian Crochet. And it's a photograph of a blue industrial sign in front of a concrete staircase with white and silver railings leading to a path through a forest. Trees and plants bend and hang over the stairs. The sign reads, built and maintained for certain bodies. So in thinking about the work, and also thinking about this sign and how it kind of aligns with this idea of failure, I'll just a little bit of a story. We were considering like, where would this actual sign go? And thinking about like, okay, let's put it in places that are inaccessible. And then the question of like, well, this park that we're in, Hardside, is actually quite accessible. So then what are the other options, and how we're considering like how this work can exist, what it can look like, talking to the artists about their like previous intentions and what their current intentions are now, knowing this new information. So not to say that was a failure, but it was a way that we had to understand this process that's taking place in real time, adjust, adapt, and allow that adaptation to make us kind of question, can this language exist in another format, and can we perceive it differently? Built and maintained for certain bodies doesn't necessarily have to speak to physical disability. Maybe it's speaking to invisible disabilities that are present. Maybe it's speaking to debilitating factors and circumstances that are present within the park, and on the outskirts of the park, within the city of Grand Rapids, and how can we question those things? So I think this idea of failure, and sometimes I bring this up and people are like, wow, you're like being really harsh to say that you failed in something. But I think to say that I failed in something is actually an acceptance of, I failed, and I know that I failed because I understand that I'm learning through that failure. And through that learning, I'm able to adapt and also kind of change and adjust my perception and the way that I'm also like contextualizing and thinking through things, which I feel like is an important process in how we're understanding inclusivity, but also how we're understanding these terms, belonging, dignity, and care within this framework of DEI work.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, when we think about failure, right? There's a lot of I talked about emotion earlier in terms of somebody feeling welcome, and I think that there's a lot of emotional energy tied up in the concept of failure, right? We link it to self-worth and self-esteem and acceptance and stuff like that. And I see failure as, right, if you look at the dictionary definition, it means you didn't meet an expectation, right? But I think going deeper sort of about that, or deeper into that in terms of the work that we do and this context, I, especially with regard to Jillian's sign, I think failure can sometimes be not considering somebody who isn't you. Right? It's like what's outside of your frame of reference or your point of view or your experience. And it would seem to me to be really valuable to think about failure in terms of growth when it comes to being a setback on the way to success, right? I think that is much greater, right? I think about it like a garden, right? The seeds you put out this year might not have grown, but you learned something, right? About when you plant them or how you water them or what kind of shade they need to be in or the compost or the mulch that you need, right? And so even though the squash didn't grow the way you wanted it to, maybe the strawberries will next time around. And so if we think about failure in the same way we think about belonging equaling community, I think failure can equal an opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this also blends really well into this next question we have around critiquing success. If we could go to the next slide, Jill. Thinking about like this analyzation of success, like what does success look like? I think in many spaces I've been in that, have this kind of corporate mindset, not saying there's anything wrong with that, but there is this, obviously, there's a desire to have KPIs in place as a way to track progress. And I think about when we think about this work, we also work with an artist that's not a part of this particular preview, but is a part of the grand scheme of the art of disruption, Yo-Yo Lin, who talks a lot about this idea of soft data. So we have like these hard facts, hard data, but sometimes like soft data are the things that go unnoticed, the things that represent feelings, emotions, the way people kind of process lived experience, the ways that people are able to navigate this kind of connection to someone else and a better understanding of someone else's experience. And so in that, I'm thinking about this like critiquing and analyzing of success. There's also this question of like, how do we show grace in this like report on what success looks like? Can grace exist in that? And grace meaning that like someone actually may fail in this lead up to trying to get to a place of success, to try to understand what success looks like. Like, can we show grace for that person? Can we remove these layers of shame that have been built up over time that causes like someone to not even want to enter into a conversation or enter into a space where they are challenged in a certain way? And I think the work that we're doing feels really important in that way, because we are thinking about obviously this analyzation of failure and success, but where does that middle ground lie? And in that middle ground, in that liminal space, like, can we actually push for a place where, yes, there's a removal of shame, there's a question of how grace exists, and there's also this invite to like really understanding this soft data and how that can become a marker for success and how we understand one another and even ourselves. And Lawrence, I don't know, I'll let you take this over if you want to take the slide, but I just wanted to get into that because I think it was a really important point to make.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to be thinking about. And the slide, shows some folks kind of sitting on the ground, sort of in a yard or in a park. Looks like they're kind of working on some artwork. And the question is, well, okay, while we're rethinking failure, in what ways should we be critiquing or analyzing success? And I love that question because we tend to think, we're conditioned to think of success and failure as binaries, right? It's one or the other. It's like, they're flip sides of the same coin, so to speak. But to my mind, failure occurs, and you kind of alluded to this in when you were speaking. I think failure can only occur when you stop. When somebody feels unwelcome or beaten down, or when grace does not exist. And so when they go, you know what, this is too difficult, too hard, I'm out, right? And they just kind of like tap out, and they're like, they don't think about it again. And I think moreover, they're not taking action, right? The growth stops. I think success, to my mind, let's say if we're using the garden analogy again, right? Success occurs, yeah, you might not have grown the squash, but success occurs when you apply that, whatever occurred in the making of that garden, to the strawberries, right? And so you take what you learned, you take that difficulty or that obstacle that you endured, and you go, oh, I don't want to do that again. How can I do it better next time around? And you get kind of pumped about it. You get kind of curious about it and be like, well, what will happen if I try it this way or I do it that way? And then you operate and navigate the world a little bit differently than you did before, because your understanding has expanded, your curiosity has grown, and you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out, right? So there's an opportunity for growth, and I think embracing that in and of itself is a sign of success.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just put like two more tidbits about success and failure. But I'm a huge Brene Brown stan. I will openly and actively state it. And in one of her books, Atlas of the Heart, she talks a lot about, well, she says it so simply, and it's just shame and empathy can't coexist.
Right.
And I think that for me is really kind of in line with what we're speaking to around this idea of belonging, dignity, and care. In order for us to like truly like actively act those words out in real time, and how we are in, like convening and speaking and in dialogue with folks, and also in action, we have to actually have empathy and without shame. Like they just can't coexist. And I think once shame kind of seeps in there, it's really hard to hold space for understanding and being able to like truly feel where people are coming from and what their actual lived experience on a day-to-day looks like.
I think it's a really important point, because my introduction to the concept of belonging, care, and dignity is similar in some ways in something that I learned in seeing a talk from a Dr. Loretta Ross. And Dr. Ross talks about, instead of calling somebody out, calling somebody in, right? And so if they're already in your circle, they're already in your group, they're already your coworker or your friend or your colleague, before you post something to Facebook or to Twitter saying how they got something wrong, you make an effort to reach out to them personally and say, yo, were you aware of ... right? And then you talk about it and you think about it and you give them an opportunity to pause and reflect before the arrows start flying, right? Before things start, the missiles start going in their direction. And I think that approach really opened up possibilities for me in terms of my way of thinking and my way of sort of processing and operating in the world, in terms of who do I want to be, right? And how do I want to address situations like these when they occur, in terms of giving somebody grace and space, in terms of maybe repairing something, or in terms of redemption when a mistake was made. How can we grow together, I think, becomes the question for me, rather than beating somebody up publicly. Yeah.
Yeah. Jill, would you mind going to the next slide? This next question is one I think still aligns with this idea of success and failure, and I'll give you info on the graphic that you're seeing. The question reads, can you truly integrate in a space that is not your own? And the image that you see is a digital rendering of a wood and metal structure. The structure has a ramp leading up to a platform supported by the frame. A wall of vertical slats takes up one side of the ramp and a railing goes up the other side. This rendering that you're seeing is actually the structure that we have currently up at Hartside Park in collaboration with Site Lab, our prize this year. And this question is something that came to mind when we were talking about this Lunch and Learn, belonging, dignity, and care, which are things that we have talked about a lot internally at DisArt. But thinking about like integration, can we truly integrate is a question that kind of I've been existing with for the past few weeks. Knowing that when you are trying to do something, obviously with the best intentions, sometimes that breeds failure. Also, other times, what can happen is you can try so hard to integrate that you're actually doing the opposite of that, and excluding things, and excluding people, excluding communities. And so this question around integration is one I wanted to bring into the conversation, because I think it's something that I don't know if there is an answer. I don't know if we can actually truly integrate. But I think that with all things, it's always worth trying. Like you said, Lawrence, this kind of process of trying, the process of actively like working towards what integration can look like, I think is something of importance. And I also think when we consider integration is not something that's going to already have this framework and prototype that already exists. I think when we truly integrate, it's going to be something that's fresh, new, and it also is going to be something that breaks open and fails. And in that broken open, there is going to be access to like better understand like what does it truly mean to be a part of a community? What does it truly mean to be an ally to a community? What does it truly mean to actually like exist in that community, even if it's not for a long period of time? So this question of integration for me is like a consideration of like, what does it mean to actually go into a space and try to build new frameworks and think about those new frameworks as a way to question what has been done, but also as a way to question like what is possible.
Yeah, I think a lot about the concepts of care and dignity when I'm thinking about this slide and this question, right? Because it seems to me integrating in a space that is not your own doesn't mean that that space cannot become your own. It can become your own, right? But people, I mean, if you just look at neuroscience, they'll tell you that people not only survive, but they thrive. They thrive when things like agency and self-determination and freedom of fear and freedom to express yourself, right, is present. And so it's not some artificial mandate, but rather fostering an environment that encourages that freedom and that sense of belonging. So in some ways, it occurred to me that as you were speaking, that maybe integration is, for lack of a better phrase, the freedom to fail. Like being in a space where you can screw it up, but that people aren't going to attack you, right? And that you might not have the answer to this question, or you might not have the right language, or you may not understand a certain experience of someone, but you can actually enter that space and be real about that. Mm-hmm. And then that sense of acceptance and being real about, man, I don't know what you're talking about, and then that opens it up, right? It can just be something different, so you didn't feel like you belong, but that process, that invitation shifts and evolves into something where somebody can feel comfortable and does feel comfortable. So it's sort of acknowledging, to my mind, it's acknowledging the reality of where we might begin, which is that space of discomfort, where we don't feel like we belong, but acknowledging it and then shifting toward, okay, what do we need to do so that somebody is integrated into that space, mm-hmm. and somebody does feel like they belong. And I think that gets to the heart of the inherent dignity of every person and to the care we bring to this work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. And I also think about with the term integration, something that's been coming up in conversation between all of us myself, Jill, Lawrence, is around presence. Truly thinking about like the ways in which we can integrate. It's a matter of like really being present with someone, or really being present with a group of people, and really being present not just with them physically, but also like emotionally and mentally, and holding that space and making sure that you have the capacity to be there. And if you don't have the capacity, questioning like, in what ways can that be of detriment? Just to try without the capacity. So that's just sort of some thoughts that I had as we were like considering this term integration. Jill, I don't know, is it possible to go to the next slide? Thank you so much. I think this is also an interesting one to think about in regards to integration and presence. Thinking about the role that language plays in how we create inclusive spaces. And just to give you all a description of what you're seeing, on this slide, there's a graphic split into two sides. On the left is a view of trees above a heavily saturated blue sky. On the left is text on on the right is text on a cream background with fragments of text mixed in between repeated streams of letters. It begins, "My thesis is that blackness," which is followed by a paragraph of the letter D. In the center are the words "disfluency" and "music are forces that open time, open brains," which is then cut off by a paragraph of the letter P. At the end of the paragraph is the word "possibilities," which is then followed by a paragraph of the letter T, which fades out as it gets lower down the page and ends with the word "temporal" very faintly. This work that you're seeing here is by one of the artists that's actually showing during this preview at Art Prize, Jerome Ellis, and it's from his piece called "The Clearing." We are actually doing one of the final listening sessions of this week, this evening at 7 p.m. If you're based in Grand Rapids, please, please, please go check it out. It's a beautiful piece, an hour in length. And Jerome's work is all about language. Jerome is a proud stutterer and actually activates this within the work that he creates, as you see in the image on the slide, and is also considering the ways in which the center has allowed for this rhythm to exist in the way that he speaks, but also in the way that he's using his voice. So it's really beautiful work if you have a chance to view it. But we talk a lot about in this work that we're doing, the ways in which language exists. Language has been something that has defined so many people, put folks in a ways, and it's also been something that has this ability to be expanded upon. We talk a lot about like, what does it look like to consider what has already been stated, what has already been used in terms of language, and to kind of reconsider what that could look like in a different like framing. But also like, what does it look like and what does it mean to actually kind of create new language? And maybe that language doesn't have to be audible language. Maybe it can be visual language. Maybe it can be gestures. Maybe it can be things that kind of navigate outside of this understanding of language that we've had historically. And so when I think about language and I think about inclusivity, I think about this consideration and questioning of like, how are we defining, like, I don't know, how are we defining all of these different terms, or how are we using these terms? How is that defining the folks that are attached to those terms? And in what ways can we question that? And in that questioning, can we start to consider like new forms of language that allow for this type of existence that isn't rigid, but has this fluidity that allows someone to feel like they can enter into a space, and if they enter into that space and feel differently, that they can use a language that allows for them to feel that, but also to project that and to be in that with another person.
Yeah, I think language to work well, right? To like sort of be functional and to be a positive force, hopefully expands one's horizons and expands one's understanding. At least it gives people space to maneuver where they might have felt constrained before. So it seems to me to be it's really important, when we're thinking. I'll give one example of something like the word disabled, right? That means very different things to different people depending on a lot of different factors. It might depend upon your age group, right? What age group you're in. It could depend on your experience and background. You might determine, it might mean something different to you if you work in the Social Security office or if you're doing workman's comp, right? But if you're thinking about disability culture or disability community, then it sort of takes it, right? Because for millennia, forever, disability has just been diagnosis to most people, right? You can't see, you can't hear, you can't walk. It's been a negative. But since the ADA and since the coming together of people, it's come to be much more. Like when you discuss, when you think of the word and talk about the word in terms of being deliberate and intentional, it can mean history, it can mean culture, it can mean community, it can mean identity. And so depending on the context in which you're using the word, it can mean so much more. And so I think that in terms of our work, right, which really is in no small way changing the world, changing the way that people think and the ways that people operate, that's taxing, right? That's hard to sort of be swimming upstream. And so if people are feeling overwhelmed and stressed and whatever just by being in the world, I think that sense of being conscious and deliberate is really important in terms of the language that we speak, so that we're speaking in a way that is expansive rather than, let's say, reductive and shutting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like language also takes on this kind of role that we speak about with that idea of continuous becoming. Like it should always continue to evolve, as you stated. And I just want to also state that, like, within this work, obviously we're speaking to themes around race and disability. There was this question Lawrence and I did, we did, when was that? That was in 2022.
A year ago, yeah, a little bit over a year ago.
We did a presentation in Oakland with Creative Growth, and we actually kind of posed the question around like how we are like actually looking at the definition of ableism. And there's obviously folks who are doing that work and continuing to expand upon that definition, Dustin Gibson and Taliwa Lewis. But like, you know, just considering like the depths of like how we're understanding disability, and also like how we kind of like crossing or like integrating different terms in our understanding of disability. Like I think about debility and capacity as ways that we can kind of have these entry points into understanding disability outside of this physical disability, but also outside of this kind of white heteronormative space of what it has been, and what it has been expected to be. And just considering like the ways in which we can adjust that thinking and that framework and the ways in which we're viewing it. So I think language allows for that, and it allows for this kind of questioning that becomes a really beautiful space. I know we're a little short on time, but we have this last question. Lawrence, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so it's the question is, what does belonging, care, and dignity look like in theory and in practice, and share examples. And the image is 4 white stacks of paper on a white wall, and the 2 stacks of paper in the back have a blank cover, and the 2 stacks in the front have text that reads "A primer on working with disabled group members," and then the other says "For feminist activist groups and organizations." And to my mind, I think what they look like in action is a willingness to examine and explore and include. It seems like, you know, for example, what we've illustrated here with taking the time to stop and pause and be deliberate about who is pinned and who is being shown and who is being seen in this conversation, and who does that give access to, I think is a clear example of really taking a moment and saying, wait a minute, this isn't working. How do we get it to work? And then taking the time to make it work. I think that's one example of putting all of those concepts into practice. In as clumsy and cumbersome as it might be, I think it's sort of the act and the deliberateness behind it is the most important thing. So yeah, that's what I would add there. Anything to add? I see somebody's raising their hand as well.
I don't have anything to add, but I see Deb, your hand is up. Please feel free to ask away or speak.
Okay, hello. I just wanted to comment on DEI, human relations, and I had two specific things I wanted to share. I've had some really interesting experiences myself because I'm a deaf person. So when I went to college, I had to really learn about disability. And I learned a lot from a medical book that I had in college. And then when I went from that and I went to the real world, going out and experiencing it, it was so different, that book knowledge versus lived experience. It was such a shock to me to be out in the real world. And it was really sad too. And the other point I wanted to share was, as I've met other deaf people, we have a long history our older generation really of deaf felt like they were disabled, whereas the younger generation of deaf, many of them are very opposed to the word disability, and they feel that word does not describe me at all as a deaf person. So it's very interesting. And some of the younger deaf, it's about the culture, versus the older deaf feeling like it's something that's missing in culture. I'm disabled, I can't hear, versus I'm deaf, and deaf culture is a part of my lived experience. It's a part of my life, and seeing that transition, it fits so well with what you've been talking about today. I've just really been enjoying that. And I feel like it's really beneficial for us to learn about DEI. You know, as you mentioned, for some people, it's just checking a box off a list. And I've seen that in certain presentations, versus someone who is really listening to a person, you know, from other individuals, or someone who's just got book knowledge of what DEI is. There's a very different experience. And I've noticed that in DEI presentations I've seen.
Thank you so much, Deb. That means a lot coming from you, and I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us. And there's a work by two artists, Liza Sylvester and Christopher Robert Jones. They're speaking about like this kind of redefining of the term deaf, and they use a lowercase d as a way to kind of own and have agency over that. And it's just considering what you were saying about like different generations kind of moving into a space of understanding like being deaf and that lived experience and being a part of disability or not, etc. I just think you would probably be really interested in the work that they're doing and the ways that they're kind of moving into like redefining that experience for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing about it's a very individual thing. Sometimes we don't realize deafness is not a visible disability. You know, for example, looking at myself, if someone just saw me, I look normal. And a lot of times people don't realize an individual is deaf. Sometimes people don't realize until I ask for an interpreter or an accommodation, and then really creates a lot of disconnect for the person, because looking at me, they're like, well, you don't look like you're deaf. I didn't know you can't hear. Like, you look like everyone else who can hear. And I just say to myself, oh boy, this is going to be quite a process today. So, and a lot of deaf people have similar type of stories of a lot of frustration with trying to get interpreters for any sort of medical, legal situation. Deaf people may have a specific interpreter who's a very good fit for them that they would prefer to work with. It's like both parties have to know how to do the dance. So you have to find an interpreter who's a good language fit for that particular deaf person. And so sometimes an interpreter may be provided, but that interpreter isn't a good fit for the individual's language. Maybe that interpreter is too English and they don't have, enough ASL, and it's sort of like dancing with a partner that isn't moving to the same rhythm that you can't fit with. So you have to have a team member who dances with you, so to speak, who's a good fit for your language. That's something we as deaf people have learned, but a lot of those agencies that are providing interpreters don't understand that process. So for example, I know there's one hospital that contracted with 2 interpreters, but out of all the deaf people in the community, can 2 interpreters really do the dance and be a perfect language fit for all community members? If you only have 2 interpreters, it's just not possible because of the diversity in language modes used by our community. So you really need more than just 2 interpreters to be able to appropriately accommodate and fit the language needs of all the deaf patients that are being seen.
Yeah, it seems, this is Lawrence, it seems really important, right, to first acknowledge that reality, and that reality can be different for different people. And then asking oneself or operating in such a way that we then say, okay, this is where we're at, and then where can we go from here? And being open to that process, right? It's embracing that continuous becoming idea, and opening oneself up to evolution and to growth, I think is important. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think we're unfortunately we're close to the end of our time, so I want to be conscious and aware. Lei, do you have anything to add to that? If and then I'll wrap, I think.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say, there's a few notes in the chat that I just want to mention. Dana Knight, hi Dana, so glad you're here. Dana says, can you guys provide a list of artists whose work addresses disability? Yes, definitely. Jill, I don't know if you have the ability to add a link from our website with that artist list, just so you can see the list of the artists. All of the artists that are part of this work are somehow dealing with disability directly, are speaking to lived experience, obviously as existing in a Black body, and thinking about the ways that debility and capacity kind of come into play, and how that kind of integrates with our understanding of disability. So a lot of the artists are kind of speaking it to it in these very abstract ways, but I think a way that allows for entry points for a lot of people to kind of enter into the space and have an understanding of what they're speaking to, what this lived experience is like, et cetera. So thank you so much for that question. And also thank you for being here. Also, we have Devin McKnight. If it's okay, I'll just read what Devin wrote in the chat. I long for more spaces that center disabled folks, especially art spaces that serve as our freedom spaces, our creative spaces of sharing, but I've yet to be in an art space that I feel welcome and supported in as a disabled person, including my own art space that I work within. I have found more belonging in virtual art spaces like this one, where we are specifically talking about disabled artistic ideas and concepts, which includes belonging and care and dignity. Other disabled artists give me so much life and help me experience the world in such a deep and full way. I also long for more disabled art workers. I long for us to be more visible in all of the ways. Thank you so much for that comment, Devin. I can absolutely just like agree 100%. Coming into this work, it's been really beautiful to find community and really truly see, like in active present time, the ways that like care is like just pushed out and just given without any force. And it's really been beautiful to like learn in this work as well. But I do feel that longing and hope that there are more active physical spaces that allow for, this kind of centering of a disabled experience. So thank you so much for that comment and that thought.
Yeah, I wish we had more time. It seems like we're just kind of scratching the surface, which in my experience kind of gets to the heart of the work itself. That I feel like we are at the very beginning, even though we've been working on this for a few years now, that we're at the very beginning and just scratching the surface of what's possible. And that's part of what the preview of Art of Disruption at Art Prize is all about, is in embarking on this journey and in seeing where it takes us and where it leads us. So thank you everybody for joining us today and for your engagement and your questions and your insights. We really appreciate it. We've got a slide here that shows that reads the Art of Disruption at the top part. It's in two sort of sections. The beginning, the top part says the art of, and then disruption at the bottom. So two different levels, and the center letters of both lines, art and rup, are slightly detached, kind of helter-skelter, with the letters on either side forming a bit of a dip. And the font and the style and the thickness is different in each letter, and that's intentional, right? It's to create this kind of visual field that you're like, whoa, what's going on? And you try to make sense of it, which is in some ways what the project is doing, which is intentionally going into the space and disrupting it, but doing that intentionally so that we can have a different experience and we can have a different conversation and a different kind of engagement. So if you've gained anything from this, if it's opened a window or a door or caused you to reflect in any way, and you want more, you're hungry and eager for more, and that this is the beginning for you too, or even if you're in the middle of your journey or you've been doing this for years and this is an approach that you value, in that sense of belonging, care, and dignity, we hope that if you're able, that you can make a donation to support DisArt and the Art of Disruption so that we can continue this work. Because as you might imagine, you know, this bumps up against a lot of concepts and ideas that people kind of that have become concrete and sort of fixed in people's minds. And so we feel it's really important to shake things up in the way that the logo does. And we hope that you'll join us on this journey, and in whatever ways you can lean in and support, we welcome and value your engagement, your involvement, and your experience. So personally, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please continue on this journey with us. Lei, anything to close?
I just want to also say thank you so much for everyone being here, being present with us, listening in, but also offering your thoughts and comments. And I also want to state that, like, a lot of this work that we're doing and this idea of processing that we're talking about, continuous becoming, like the work that we're doing in Grand Rapids for Art Prize, it doesn't stop with this one project, this one activation, this one site structure. We will be back. We'll continue to be back. I think the work is ongoing. When we talked earlier about integration and presence, presence is not something that just happens over a few weeks or a few months. It happens over a duration of time. It's a lifetime kind of participation, and a lifetime, like, you know, just like lean in to what it really truly looks like to be present. So we're hoping that we will be back in many different forums, and really are just excited for the ways that we can just collaborate on this work. That's our main thing, is how do we actually convene together, commune together, collaborate together. So if we weren't able to collaborate this time around, just know that, like, we're hoping in different formats we can collaborate in the future. And we're so grateful for everyone that's here today. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I'll just close by once again thanking our sponsors. Thanks to the Ford Foundation and the Grand Rapids Community, Steelcase, National Endowment for the Arts, Art Prize, Conduit Studios, Degage Ministries, Fast Signs, Sidecar Studios, Site Lab, and Spanish language internship project SLIP out of University of Michigan. And thank you, Laura, for your sign language interpretation during this presentation.
Yeah. Thank you all. And thank you, Jill and Lawrence. Love you both.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.